back to the Me, Myself, and Hopefully You podcast. My name is Tarek, a 19-year-old university student currently experiencing a midlife crisis. Why, you might ask? Because I have no idea what I want to do with my life. So rather than see a therapist, I decided to start a podcast where I get to interview guests from an array of backgrounds with pretty amazing stories to tell. And hopefully, by learning about their stories, I can help create an interesting story for myself. Today, I've got yet another interesting guest. I have no idea why these guests actually have the time to come on. I don't know why they actually accept, to be honest. They have stories that should be on the Joe Rogan podcast. They should be on the Happy Hour podcast. They should be on the True Geordie podcast. And this is a story like no other. Today, my guest at this time has lived a very, very interesting life. He spent the vast majority of his life in the British Army, in maritime security, peacetime security, sorry, not maritime security, in peacetime armies. And then he ended up doing something even more incredible. He ended up getting involved in Somali piracy, the Somali piracy crisis. And this took place pretty much during 2008 and 2012, where there was a rise in pirates attacking big oil tanks, taking over the ships and holding several members on board as hostages and asking for ridiculous amounts of money for ransom. A lot of the time, they would successfully get the ransom due to insurance, but sometimes they wouldn't, and those sometimes would often lead to hostages being on board ships and in for long periods of time. And in the cases for John Steed, who is my guest today, he had to deal with a case where the pirates had held the hostages for over 4 years. He tells me about that process on the Naham 3 ship and the Albedo ship, what that was like, suffering a heart condition in the middle of negotiations, and the entire story of how he managed to end up saving 191, yes, 191 hostages with the help of his team. It's an incredible story. It definitely deserves recognition. He deserves a lot more recognition than he's actually been given. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. John Steed. So, John, I want to start off with some quick fire questions just to get to know you a bit more, a little bit better. My first quick fire question is, what is the last thing on your camera roll?
That's a good question. The last thing on my camera roll is a picture of the Helford River, which is roughly where I live. And some of the people who have heard my pirate stories, I always tell them that there are a lot more pirates in Cornwall. And the Helford River and Frenchman's Creek, which features in a novel by Daphne du Maurier, is all about pirates in Cornwall. So that was the last picture on my camera.
All right, well, that is fitting for what we're going to eventually talk about, hopefully. You mentioned pirates, we're definitely going to get into that later on. But before that, another quick fire question. Who would you consider as, if you had to just pick one, who would you consider as a role model in your life?
It's probably somebody you guys have never heard of, but he's called Ambassador Augustine Mahiga. And he's from Tanzania. He was Tanzania's representative on the UN Security Council, and he was my boss for a while in the UN. Fantastic guy, massive amount of diplomatic experience, and taught me a lot. I've been a soldier all my life, and I'm not very diplomatic, so taught me a lot about being diplomatic.
Why would you sort of pick him? Is it because of sort of his experience and the professionalism? Is that why you pick him as your sort of role model?
Yeah, experience, the way he sadly he was he's just died because of COVID, but he was how he dealt with people was a real experience to somebody like me coming from a military background.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll get to talk about him later on as well then. My final quick fire question is, if there was a house fire, God forbid, but everyone made it out, right? Every cat, every person in the house, they made it out alive. And you have your phone and your laptop with you because everyone carries their phone and laptop with them. But you could only keep one item and save one item. What would that item be?
Oh my, Um, that's a really difficult question.
A lot of people always struggle with this one. They start looking around the house.
Yeah,
What
yeah, exactly. I would have said my laptop because my entire life is
Yeah,
sitting in my laptop. Probably a photograph album because
yeah.
these sort of memories you can't recreate.
Yeah, no, a lot of people say that because a lot of people are starting to say phone and laptop to the answer. I was like, you know what, I'm going to take those options away because everyone's saying phone and laptop. So instead, let me
Yeah,
see. Now everyone's saying photo album, so I might actually in the future take that option away as well, just to make it a little bit more different. But I mean,
yeah.
I don't blame you for choosing a photo album because you have led a very interesting life. But before we sort of get into the questions, could you sort of give us a quick introduction to yourself?
Um, well, my name's John Steed. I was born in Cornwall in England. I've spent most of my entire life in the military. I joined at just over the age of 17, and I retired when I was 55. So that's most of my life I've been in the military. I've had some fantastic jobs. I've been all over the world, and some great things that I'm quite proud of. I'm married. Um, I have I have children, and I'm looking forward to phase two of my life and getting on with doing other things. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant. I mean, I'm surprised. I see everyone's always humble when I ask that question. They don't actually talk about or they don't mention some of the amazing stories or like a little bit here and there or just like a little introduction of their amazing stories. I want to start off first with sort of you going into the British Army. You said yourself that you've spent most of your life in the British Army. Why did you sign up?
Well, I was born here by the sea. If you could look out of my window, you'd see sea on three sides. My mum was in the Wrens, the women's navy during the war. I sail and do everything on boats, so I wanted to join the navy. Joining the army was not my priority. I wanted to join the navy, but I'm colorblind, and so that bars you from service in the navy. So I had to, I joined the army, and in the army I joined the Royal Corps of Signals, which the Army's communicators, which is a bit ironic given that I'm colorblind, and signaling and wiring and stuff all requires you to know your colors. But yeah, that's why I joined the army. I had to because I couldn't join the navy. Don't tell anybody I said this in the army, please.
I joined just because I couldn't join that one, so I just went second best. Might as well go with you lot. Well, I'm surprised they actually let you join the army if you're colorblind as well. To be honest,
Well,
um,
worse still, somewhere along the line, I like to learn to do things. So, I have a yacht master certificate for sailing, and I also learned to fly as something different. I was living up in Newcastle, and in the unit I had was on an old airbase. And so I went to the local flying club and learned to fly. One of the prerequisites was a lot of detailed analysis of my colorblind status, because you'll notice when you land on an airfield, you'll notice there are boxes either side and it's either red or green. Determines whether your height. So being red green colorblind was not exactly an advantage. Apparently my colorblindness isn't too bad, so I got my flying license. But colorblindness has been an interesting feature of life.
yeah. Well, what's it like to fly, John? I've always wanted. I really want to know how to, but it's so expensive. I hope one day I can learn.
Um, well, like a lot of universities and have flying clubs, and even my daughter Faith is here with me, learned to fly at a school in Kenya. And it's great. It's like a whole different world. You get off the ground and you're up there, and There's only you who can control it. When you're in control of a plane, it's all up to you. Whatever goes right and goes wrong is entirely down to you. So it's an amazing experience. I decided I wasn't a very good pilot, but it was a practical thing. I was living in Newcastle. My home is in Cornwall. It's
All
quite a
right.
long way. So maybe it's better than driving. My wife didn't think selling the family car and flying was such a great idea, but there you
I
go.
think it's a brilliant idea. That is brilliant. You'll never have to deal with traffic again.
Well, how most people have booster seats in the back of their car for their kids.
Yeah.
I had booster seats in the back of a plane.
Oh wow! I didn't even know you can have that sort of stuff.
No, they were for a car. I just stuck them in the back of the plane.
Oh, so you just whacked them on the back and thought, yeah,
Yeah.
that should be safe. Yeah, why not? Just put a baby in the back. It's all right. Happy days. So let's talk a bit more about your sort of army life before we get into the pirates or the encounter you had with pirates. What was your how would you sort of describe your life in the army? What were sort of some of the ups? What were some of the downs? What sort of experiences do you have? How would you describe it?
Well, I was an officer, and I went to the military academy at Sandhurst and trained as an officer. And you learn very quickly that the army is all about, and being an officer is all about leadership, and leading guys and girls is a huge privilege. Where people look to you for the answer, look for you to know what to do when things are bad or difficult, and being in that sort of position is a massive privilege. And throughout your army career, you start in very small units, and right up to commanding a regiment. I commanded a regiment in Liverpool, a Royal Signals Regiment in Liverpool, with a squadron in Manchester, by the way. And being in charge, first of all, is a massive privilege, but huge responsibility too. Anybody will tell you on operations when you're in charge, not only are you're worrying about the tactical situation and what you have to do on the ground, but massive responsibility, because all of these people with you, you're responsible for them. You're responsible for their lives and everything that happens to them. So yeah, great responsibility, but something I don't regret at all, and enjoyed enormously.
Oh, wow. Forgive my ignorance, John, but when I think of sort of army and being in the army, I'm thinking, you got a gun, you're shooting people, you're going to other countries, you're taking on the bad guys and whatever. Is how sort of good of a analysis is that? Am I right in thinking that, or people right in thinking that, or is that just completely not what the army is about? Is it more about being ready to fight rather than actually fighting?
A peacetime army, most of the time you don't get to do any fighting, and certainly in the bulk of my time in the army, it was a peacetime army. When I joined, the Cold War was still going on. I spent a lot of my time in Germany, sitting in Germany, waiting for the Russians to come over the border and defending against that. That's what the bulk of the British Army did. It's only in recent years where there have been a lot of operations overseas that the Army's been involved in, that changes the nature of being in the Army. But it's about being prepared. It's about training, and being ready. And in more recent years, the army has had to be ready and has fought all over the world, but particularly in the Middle East.
Do you ever sort of truly feel like you're ready? If something happens, do you ever think we're ready? My team is ready, or is that something that you can never feel until you're actually in the midst of it all?
Well, if you weren't ready, you wouldn't send them.
Okay.
Sending people who are not ready to war is that's not acceptable. And you as the commander of a unit, whatever size unit, it's your job to make damn sure that your unit is absolutely ready, and it's up to you.
And what does that sort of are you so are you sort of going through the ranks first? So like you've got an officer that you sort of that you're subordinate to, then you became an officer, and now you've got your own group. Are you sort of teaching them and teaching them to be ready, and how are you teaching them those sort of skills to be ready for anything that might happen?
Well, a lot of it comes from experience. So, the guys who are over you are, much more experienced than you and pass on that experience. But British Army training is, second to none. The British Army's been doing this sort of thing for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it is very good at it. But being ready isn't just about the training that you do, it's also about having the right and the best equipment, and the right leadership. So there are all sorts of things that determine ready, but units go through readiness tests to make sure that they're ready. Advanced training where you're training with live rounds, and in scenarios and training areas like Kenya, where you can train in much more realistic conditions. So I was the UK's defence advisor in Kenya, and we provided very good realistic training in Kenya that would simulated some of these field conditions.
So yeah, so you mentioned that you were UK's defence advisor in Kenya. So who are you advising? Who are you actually advising there? So you're working on. Are you working on behalf of? I don't understand the role of you. Yeah, I don't understand. Could you just explain that to me a bit?
Well, think about a country's ambassador. So
Yeah.
the British ambassador in Kenya, or High Commissioner in this case, you're like the military equivalent. So you're advising the British government about conditions in Kenya and military scenarios in the region. I didn't just cover Kenya; I covered Tanzania, Seychelles, Eritrea, and Somalia. So you're advising the British government about what's happening in the region and the readiness of those forces in the region. You're assisting those countries too, with support from the British government and from the British military, and training provided to those countries to help them respond and to be able to cope with things that they've got going on in their region better. So it sort of goes both ways. You're helping the countries that you're there to support, but you're also advising the British government on what's happening in that region.
Was there sort of any period where I know you said that you were sort of when you were in the British Army itself, as a peacetime soldier, you were and during the Cold War you were waiting sort of for the Soviet Union to come over in Germany, and just in case something would happen. Was there any sort of period, any time in your life where something did happen and you did have to sort when you did have to start using weaponry and it was no longer a peacetime army?
Well, in my case, I've been in a number of operational situations. Maybe the best one is the best example. The Western Sahara, the Spanish Western Sahara. I went there to monitor the ceasefire between the Polisario and Morocco, and oversee the ceasefire agreement in the Western Sahara. And whilst there is a ceasefire in place, there was still the potential for hostilities. There was still a lot of military hardware lying around, and on day one we walked into a minefield. So all of that training, came to the fore, in an instant on day one, and it was very much, a very dangerous situation. And 6 months in the desert, was not the greatest of fun, but very interesting experience that went from a sort of peacekeeping scenario to something a bit more in an instant. But that sort of thing happens. Another example, I was doing something very similar. I keep getting these strange jobs, but I was doing something similar to overseeing, monitoring the ceasefire between North and South Sudan before Sudan became a country in its own right. And our job was to oversee the ceasefire and fly in and investigate any breaches of the ceasefire. One day we got off our plane, landed on somewhere where there had been some horrendous activity, burning of villages and potentially killing of civilians. And I got off the plane in my usual British Army fashion and marched up to the guy I thought was in charge, where he promptly smacked me in the mouth with a rifle butt. And I went down like a deck of cards with blood and stuff everywhere and no teeth. So the guy who did this was, immediately set upon by the rest of my team, who, are actually from his own country, and that this guy had done something to their leader, and promptly flown back to Nairobi and given a new set of teeth. I have great teeth. Thanks very much.
So really, you should be thanking him then. He's allowed you to have a great
situations, but it shows you these situations change very, very, very quickly. When you think there's a peaceful scenario, it can change on an instant, particularly these sort of places where there's been conflict.
So did you think that guy was responsible for it, and that's why you went up to him, or was he not actually responsible for it, and you wrongly assumed?
Well, I think the side that he represented had been involved in atrocities, and therefore the last thing they wanted was a bunch of international monitors coming and seeing what they'd done.
Do you think
it makes he smacked me with the end of the rifle, and he didn't, with the sharp end, and put a round through me. So I was probably lucky to get away with my teeth.
Yeah, no, I mean, you had your guys backing you, They were probably like, "Mate, what are you doing?" They probably started aiming their guns at him or whatever, or something like that.
So yeah, but and of course we were unarmed observers, so we had no ability to defend ourselves.
Oh, so you had no weapons there. Isn't that just like when you're in that position, aren't you just thinking we should really actually have guns? Why do you not have guns? Because the thing is, if someone shoots you, you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, exactly. But you need to appear to be neutral, and you're not taking sides. You're not there to be part of the conflict, so you're projecting this neutral image. So, but it can be a bit dangerous.
Yeah. What's going through your sort of mind when when you have no gun, you're literally just like open, essentially, for shooting from either side, and you're just what's going through your mind there? Like, how are you sort of trying to stay composed in that situation? It's tense. North South Sudan, for example, it's a tense situation. Anything could happen at any moment. You mentioned before you had a minefield on the first day. Like, what's going through your mind? Or when you're just walking around, literally ready. Or I don't even know what the word is. Like, it's like you're just saying, "Shoot me," because you've got nothing on you.
Well, it's you're using the force of your fantastic personality to try and hope that they're not going to do anything like that. But you are pretty defenseless, and you feel quite vulnerable at times. We'll talk in a minute about some of the piracy things, but very similar situation where I've landed on an airstrip to pick up hostages, and you've got absolutely nothing, and the plane lands and you can see all these technicals, vehicles with heavy machine guns on the back around the airstrip, and you think, oh my god, is this going to be okay?
Right. I mean,
and of course you've got people who you're responsible with you. It's not it's not you just on your own, and you've got the air crew that come with you and all these everybody, and you're worried about them as well.
So I mean, that was just sort of a snippet of your sort of career in the British Army and then as UK Defence Advisor. But I mean, something even more crazy ended up happening in your life. You sort of talked about how you don't know how you got these crazy jobs. Well, this one you actually took upon yourself, didn't you? This one in between 2008 and 2012, when the Somali piracy crisis happened, you decided to take it on. Could you explain to us what that was and what had happened?
You probably, I mean, everybody knows heard about Somali piracy, and you know what most people know is that the pirates come along, you know, these little skinny guys in small boats, and they attack a massive oil tanker, and they scramble on board and hold the oil tanker for a hostage and for ransom. And usually, the oil tanker's insured, and the insurance company negotiates and pays up, and they drop, you know, $10 million, you know, by parachute, and then the pirates release the ship, and everybody goes away happy. That's the usual scenario. That's what happened in, you know, 9 cases out of 10 in off the coast of Somalia. But in the odd case where sometimes it was a less scrupulous ship owner, he hadn't got insurance, and hadn't got anything to negotiate with. And yet the pirates saw a ship and thought, well, they were going to get money, and they didn't. So these guys gradually became forgotten, got left behind. Sometimes they were taken ashore, and held, but still the owner had no money. And sadly, you know, in this modern era, most of the crew tended to be from Southeast Asia. Um, with families who've got absolutely nothing. That's why the guys were at sea trying to earn money for their families back at home. They got nothing to bargain with. And the pirates will get more and more frustrated and more violent. And these poor guys were just left to rot, and not, you know, months as normal with some of the big ships where there was money. Years went by, and these guys were just left to rot in the desert. And I was the military advisor at the time to the UN in Somalia, and decided, well, you know, somebody had to do something to try and resolve this. So with the support of the guy I mentioned to you in your very first question, Ambassador Augustine Mahiga, who supported me in this, I tried to see if there was something we could do. Initially, I never thought about ransoms or paying. I thought, we know, using all these sort of negotiation techniques that we've talked about, you know, that I would be able to negotiate, and through my good contacts in government in Somalia and with various militia and so on, I'd be able to negotiate them out and get them free. But that didn't work. Didn't happen. It was always going to take money, and that was a bit difficult for the UN. So you know, we formed another partnership with some other guys, and who were going to help on a pro bono basis, and we started to try and negotiate for these people. That's how it started.
Yeah. So were you the sort of first person that was really trying to attempt to sort of save these guys, or did you join a group that was already trying to do it? Because I know in the documentary, you had Leslie Edwards, who was a negotiator. Did you bring him on, or was he already on? And was there, and the ambassador as well, was he already on the case, or had everyone pretty much just dismissed it, and you went, right, no, we need to do something about it?
Sadly, it started with me, because there was nobody else doing anything about it. Leslie Edwards was a professional negotiator, and, you know, had done some of these big ships where there was, you know, ransoms paid by the insurance company. So it started with me. I tried to negotiate with some of these pirates, and it became very obvious they wanted money. I didn't have the money. The little money that I was offered was not enough. And there came a stage where I was, you know, getting out of my depth. So we took on these other partners, Leslie Edwards, a firm of lawyers in London, and we did it as a team effort. And, you know, thank God that this team effort's been pretty successful up until now.
Yeah, it's an incredible story, and I recommend everyone to check out the documentary that I watched. It was fascinating. Although I do have some questions about the documentary, because I feel like it missed bits out based on the research I did, but then also the documentary. it did miss bits. I don't know. Maybe I've gotten confused, but we'll get into that. So what was the sort of initial? You mentioned ransoms and you couldn't pay for it. What was the initial asking price that they wanted?
Well, the case, I mean, we did lots of cases, and some were, extremely successful, and didn't really attract any attention. The one that attracted attention and is the main subject of Colin Freeman's book. It was a ship called the Albedo, and the Albedo was one of these ships where the owner didn't have insurance, and the crew were held on this ship. The Pakistani element of the crew were ransomed by their families and left everybody else behind. So the guys who were left behind, they were then tortured quite badly. One was shot and killed, and the ship was in a pretty poor condition, and eventually the ship sank. And despite all my pleas to the navies and other people around, nobody came to these guys' rescue, and they had to jump into the sea on a very stormy night. Some of them, most of them, were rescued. A lot of the pirates died as well, but and they were pulled out of the sea by some very heroic crewmen from another ship that had been pirated, called the Nahum 3. They were taken to safety, and then were taken ashore, which whereupon we had this long protracted negotiation to get them out and get them free.
So that second ship wasn't mentioned in the documentary, was it?
Can't remember.
I don't think it was. This is what I was confused about, right? Because I bet my research, like, it sort of went a similar route to what my research, what I researched, what that was saying. But then the documentary, because obviously you mentioned that other ship. I don't think that other ship was mentioned. The Nahum 3 definitely was. That was the sort of main bit about it. So just to sort of paint the picture, there were two pirated ships. One ended up sinking. Is that right? Yeah. And then the other one, and then you said, so crew members from the other one ended up saving the other pirates.
The one was so the Albedo was a commercial container ship that had been taken by the pirates, and was being held close to the Somali coast, and then tied astern of it, tied behind it, was this large Taiwanese fishing vessel, also held by pirates from the same clan and the same sort of group.
Okay.
So they were tied together. When the Albedo sank, it was still attached to this Taiwanese fishing boat, and it was the crew from the Taiwanese fishing boat, the Nahum 3, that helped rescue those that survived off the Albedo when it sank. So and pulled them out of the water.
So were they forced to by the pirates that were on the?
No, they did it because these guys would. It wasn't just the hostages that jumped into the water; all the pirates jumped into the water as well, and several of them died as well that night.
Wow.
Interestingly, on the back of this Taiwanese fishing boat as well, was an American hostage who'd been kidnapped on land, and he was being hidden on the back of this fishing boat. An American journalist, and so he was hidden out of the way of prying satellite eyes on the back of the ship. So there was quite a lot going on this fishing vessel, the Nahum 3. But after we'd negotiated the Albedo and got the crew free, the heroes on the Nahum 3 became our next target, because they risked everything to get these people out of the water. So we were determined that we would then get the Nahum 3 crew out if we could.
So the hostages on the Albedo one, the ones that had survived, the ones that the Nahum 3 pirate crew, the Nahum 3 crew had helped them from that, saved. That's it, saved. Were they now on the Nahum 3 as well?
Yeah, they were all there together.
Okay, and so now they were all captured all together, or held hostage together.
And then eventually the pirates who were the pirate bosses who were controlling this, they took the Albedo crew ashore, and they put them in a camp ashore, and they held them hostage ashore. The same happened to the Nahum 3 as well, because the ship became unseaworthy as well.
Yes, and they were dragged on shore, wasn't it?
they took the Nahum 3 crew ashore as well, and they were held ashore.
So again, they're all now held together as almost one, because it's the same pirate clan, and it's just a load of hostages to them.
Yeah.
And is that so? And is that the total of I think, was it 26 or something?
Yeah, on the there were 11 on the Albedo, and then 20. What was it? 26 on the Nahum 3.
Ah, okay, right. I see.
And Michael Scott Moore as well, and then they all got split up again, and separated.
Oh, okay, so they got split up again, right?
Yeah,
And
so they were taken from shore. The Albedo crew went to one place, the Nahum 3 crew went to another, and Michael Scott Moore went back to wherever he was being held.
Right. See, the documentary didn't mention that, and I didn't know anything about this American journalist either. So I'd like to ask you a bit more about that as well. You mentioned sort of they obviously they were being tortured on there. Some of the examples were, well, actually, I'll let you talk about some of the examples. What sort of what were some of the more horrific ones that you were hearing about what was going on? Or were you hearing them at the time, or did you only hear them afterwards?
No, we were, one of the techniques of the pirates was to torture the crew while they were on the phone to somebody. I mean, usually they do that. They torture them on the phone to the owner in order to persuade the owner to pay up. And when there was no owner, they would call their families and
Wow.
torture them on the phone. And when I was talking to them, there was this ever present threat that they were going to kill them. And it makes the negotiations quite difficult, which is why having an independent negotiator, somebody who's not immune to the threat, but who has a different objective, isn't so influenced by the threat, often makes a much better deal. And so, but having them threaten the guys was awful. I mean, one of my best memories, it was the bosun of the Albedo, so like the guy in charge of the crew, because the captain and all the officers who were they paid a ransom, but their families paid, and off they went. So the bosun was the guy who was left in charge, and they used to hang him upside down over the water tank, thing they used to swim in, and beat him with a bar, hanging upside down. They also hung people over the side until they were almost drowning. So pretty awful stuff. I don't have much, I've got to know a lot of the pirates quite well, but I don't have any sympathy with any of them. I would do my utmost to make sure they were put in jail and get what they deserved. What they did to some of these people was absolutely despicable.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, I didn't know that was. I mean, some of the ones that you didn't even mention there, I know one of them, the psychological sort of torture that they did with the where they would line them up, and or they'd line up one of them, and they'd aim the gun at them, but it would be an empty gun, and so they'd shoot it, so they had the clicking sound, but they wouldn't obviously shoot them. But it give them that psychology, like you think that you've just been shot when you hear it. It's like in the movies when a gun's about to go off, they click it and they've forgotten to load it. It's the psychology. I mean, I know no one can really imagine what that's like, but you for a second there, you think you're gonna die, and you almost do die in a way, because he did shoot, he did click, or he pulled back on the trigger. But obviously it was all a sort of a psychological element to get them
in many of these cases. In many of these cases, the hostages all thought they were going to die. You imagine after 4.5 years of this sort of treatment, as the Albedo crew went through, they thought their lives were over. They thought they were never going home. That one by one they were going to die. If they weren't killed by the pirates, they were going to die of sickness and whatever. They never really thought they were going home. So part of what we did was to make them have hope. So in providing that hope, we would send in medical supplies or try and buy food that would get to the pirates. But the pirates would only feed the hostages when they could. People have often heard me say that when they could feed their goats, they'd feed the hostages. So but the idea of providing those sort of things to make them think that there was somebody out there who did care about them, who did know they were there, and was doing something to get them out. One of the other things that we did was when we negotiated a deal with the pirates, we made them sign a contract, and the witnesses to that contract were the hostages. We made them sign the deal as well, so they knew, a deal had been done, and they were at some stage they were going to go home, and give them hope.
Wow, so that's like because obviously the contract isn't legally binding, but it's sort of
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's a moral sort of, or is moral.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's to give them hope and make them push on just a little bit further in the hope that someone is out there sort of trying to save them.
But you want the pirates to, you want to tie them into a deal, and we talk about, well, I'm not sure they know what honor is, but if you honor your side of the deal, we'll honor our side of the deal and get you the money that you want. You're going to get paid. But in return, we want these guys alive and well. So, introducing them to honor was an interesting concept too.
Yeah, no, I don't think they did have any honor. I remember again in the documentary, Leslie Edwards talking about how he was on the phone, and Leslie Edwards, I reminded, it was the negotiator, and he was on the phone to the pirates, and he was like, why don't you guys have some sort of moral decency, and you should let these guys go. These guys have families, and they have friends, and they have people that they have to look after. And the pirates' response was, none of them are Somalians. Why would you care? Well, they're nothing for us. And it was like, and you could see sort of the face in Leslie Edwards when he was saying the story. It was like I couldn't believe it. They're still humans. What, I don't know what they were talking about, but that just sort of went to show that you couldn't play on the idea of morality with them. They didn't care about morality. They cared about money, and they wanted the ransom money.
In the end, it's all about money.
Yeah, it is.
And they, but the trick, and one of the things that Leslie Edwards is very good at is making the pirates understand that we're there to try and give them what they want. They're going to get what they want, but you have to give us what we want too. And you have to work with us, and you'll get what you want. And that's the trick to getting the negotiations going. We're there on your side.
I want to take a quick break from that, because in a few weeks, or in the first few weeks of sort of this private mission that you decided to launch, you ended up suffering a heart attack. What was that like? Was that your first? Was that the first time you'd suffered something like that? And how did you sort of recover from that?
I was a fit, active soldier. Maybe I was getting on a bit, but so a heart attack was out of the blue, and it was due to the pressure. I was handling the early negotiations on the Albedo on my own. I'd had some problems with a guy who'd offered us money and then turned out to be a complete fraud. And that I'd made a deal with the pirates that I couldn't honor, and the pressure was just too much, and I had a massive heart attack. Luckily, at the time, I was with some guys from the FBI who were pretty swift and got me to a hospital in Nairobi quickly. But normally, from this type, it wasn't really a heart attack; it was called an aortic dissection, and normally, that kills you. And I'm very lucky that I'm still here, and pure coincidence that an Indian surgeon was also out in Nairobi from the UK, and one of the world's experts in this surgery, and managed to patch me up. So wow. Pretty lucky.
Yeah, very lucky there. Yeah, it's like all the cards lined up for you there, apart from obviously getting the heart attack.
So, a lot of people told me, well, enough's enough. You've the writing's on the wall. You've nearly died doing this. You need to leave it, and somebody else will do it. But that's not possible. We already discovered that nobody else was going to do it. So the recovery package was, getting back on my feet and getting back to the negotiations and getting these guys out. So I actually recovered pretty quickly from it. My son's a physio, so my son was out with me, and combination of my son and my wife, and I got back up on my feet very quickly.
What sort of impact was this? I know you said obviously this was before the likes of Leslie Edwards had gotten involved. What was the sort of impact? What sort of impact did this sort of have on your family life and your relationship? Because obviously you're stressed. You just had a heart attack now. You're doing this all on your own. What sort of impact did it have on your relationships?
Well, without without telling your listeners, too much of a long story. I got divorced immediately after it, and
After the heart attack?
yeah, and so actually it was great. It clarified a lot of things. It sorted out a lot of things, and got back to reality. I have I'm remarried to my wife is Kenyan, and I have two great Kenyan daughters, or adopted girls, and it sort of focused life a lot too on what was important, what wasn't, and being happy in yourself was one of those things, and having a mission was another, and getting these guys out was, and so I still think it speeded up the recovery hugely.
Yeah, no, I mean it is incredible. So you've gone through so much and you still persevered on. And so you end up getting back onto it. Obviously, you get the lawyers from London and others involved. And you're getting also donations for the ransom to get paid as well. What was the maximum amount that you'd made? Was it all given straight to the pirates at the end, or was some of it kept for something else? Or
no, I mean, raising money is quite difficult. You'd think that with people would be with so much on the line that getting money would be quite easy, but it's not. And with the stages of the Albedo negotiation, the pirates wanted about 900,000 after we'd negotiated it down quite a lot. And we had, we at the most we had a couple of 100,000. That's all we had to offer, and we'd already had one false up with this donor who'd offered us money and then turned out to be a complete liar. So we had very little money, and so there was never anything left over. Every little penny was used to either pay the ransom or to fund the logistics of rescuing the crew. Getting an aircraft into Somalia, chartering an aircraft, all of the bits and pieces that go with it, and all the people you have to get support from, costs a great deal of money. But if somebody was doing this commercially, they would be charging, the insurance company or whoever, or the company or country, a huge amount of money. I like to think that we've managed to do it for relatively low amounts, and all of it's been used to get the people free.
yeah, this is sort of where I got really confused with the documentary, and I think I think it's sort of clear now, because now I know that there was two ships, the Albedo and the Naham 3. Because I read somewhere about there was a member of the crew, his name was Aman, was given a phone. Okay, so was that the Albedo then?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Naham, yeah. Or okay, yeah.
Aman was he was a very young boy at the time, on the Albedo, a young seaman, but he was very good at communicating with people, and he struck up a relationship with the pirates. He used to do the cooking, and he was somebody the pirates trusted, and so we were able to, use him in the end to make the deal that we did.
Yeah, I remember when I was reading that, I just because it spoke about in the I think it was on a website, and it was talking about how a man had he was chewing something called cat, I think, which is like it gives you sort of a drug like sensation, and he was chewing that with the pirates. Do you know how he managed to strike up a relationship? These are his captors. This is see in my mind, I'm thinking these are your captors. Number one, how are you actually managing to not wanting to just strangle them? And number two, why are the captors happy to go, oh yeah, let's have some cat? It's like going, oh, you want a cigarette and smoking with the people that you're holding hostage. It doesn't make sense to me. Surely they just kept on the side and not allowed to speak to the rest of the pirates.
But think of it a bit differently. You're in a desert village in the middle of nowhere. You've been held hostage 4.5 years. You're going to have a relationship with your kidnappers. It's not like some of these other kidnaps. People held in solitary confinement and blindfolded and shackled. This had gone on a long time, 4.5 years, and so there was a relationship. They were held in, yes, they were held in a hut altogether, but they were allowed out, and the pirates, if they used him as a servant. And so and he was it's about survival, and you do whatever you have to do to survive. You'll see there's recently as an Italian lady nurse was kidnapped in Kenya and taken into Somalia, and she survived, and she wasn't held that long, but she converted to Islam in that period, and it was a survival mechanism, but she converted and fully believes you do what you have to do to survive. And so if you can have a relationship with the pirates, that's what Aman and the others did. And they had such a good relationship with the pirate leader that they were able to come up with this idea that maybe the pirate leader could be bribed. And that's what led to this very unorthodox solution that happened in this case, not one that you would remotely recommend if you were a professional negotiator or in trying to get people free. But we thought long and hard about was this something that we could go with and support and pay for, but in the end it worked and we got them free.
So was the same team on your side? Was the same team working on both the Albedo case and the Naham 3 case?
Yeah, there isn't any other team. It's me and there's Edwards and the lawyers, and that's it.
You were both working on them. So you were negotiating with two sets of pirates at the same time?
Yeah, well, in actually several sets of pirates, because we had there are other cases going on as well.
Wow. How many are there altogether that you were sort of, in terms of hostages, how many were there?
Would you 191.
Say? 191.
Yeah.
Wow.
Over that entire period, the last bunch of guys we released were 3 Iranians last year.
That needs to be talked about more. 191. And so how much what was the ransom total for them all for 191?
God, I've never actually worked that out. Not all of them required, the detailed negotiations like the Albedo. Some we just picked up and rescued because somebody had freed them on the ground, and we just went in and rescued them and brought them out and got them home. Not all of the cases needed a full negotiated release, but 191 in total.
That's crazy. That I mean.
It's something I'm hugely proud of.
Yeah, no, I bet
the number comes to me just like that.
Yeah, no, I bet. No, I remember I remember at the end of the documentary, your emotion just from the Naham 3 one, and that was. I mean, I say that's just 20 odd, but that's still amazing. But 191, that's
The
crazy.
Nahum
What's that?
3 was, was the biggest group.
Yeah.
And the one, whilst we in the documentary we don't say how much we paid, but it was quite a lot of money, the biggest amount that we paid.
Are you not allowed to talk about how much you paid?
It's not that we're not allowed. You have to do a lot of things to get these free, and the people who donated the money don't want to be don't want to be known, and I'm not sure we want people to know exactly how we did it.
No, I completely understand that. I want to talk a bit more about Aman as well, just the sort of story of because so you managed to, or your team managed to get how did you sort of hear about this Aman character? How did you know that Aman was developing this relationship with the pirate leader and the pirates on the, did they tell you, or how did that come about?
They gave him access to a phone, and the pirate leader gave him a hidden phone, which is why we knew the pirate leader was susceptible to being bribed. And so they had a hidden phone, so we were able to communicate with him directly.
Why did the pirate leader give him a phone?
Because he wanted us to do a deal with him.
Oh, so did the pirate leader go, listen, you call up these guys, tell them that this was, so it was the pirate leader who first thought of the...
Yeah, because they weren't getting their, a piracy act has a series of investors, and the investors are the big men, the Mr. Bigs, who put up the money, and they expect to get, a big return for their money. And all these negotiations were going on. It was obvious they weren't going to get big money. And even though the pirate leader, would have gotten a fairly decent share, it wasn't as much as the kingpins and the investors. And by the time all the money's divvied out, they're not going to get very much. So the pirate leader saw the writing on the wall and thought, well, is there a way I can get a decent amount of money and stiff everybody else? So he was up, and we took advantage.
Yeah. So I mean, when you first heard of this sort of almost, I use the word corrupt in inverted commas because he's a pirate. But when you heard of when you heard of the more corrupt, or the double-ended corrupt, the pirate, did you think, we've got something here, we can work on this guy, let's essentially try and essentially do the plan that he's talking about and get him the money, because the plan was that he would take all the ransom money in a certain way. What was that sort of what was the sort of original plan there? How would you get him? How would you make it out so that he would get all the money and the rest of them wouldn't find out?
Well, your first question is, what did you think? And I thought this was the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. It was relayed to Leslie Edwards first, and when we discussed it, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. We've already had so many things go wrong in this case. This is just daft. And then the plan was that he was going to take the money. He was going to provide sleeping pills that were going to be mixed into the food of the pirate guards, and they'd all go to sleep. And then when they all went to sleep, the crew, he would facilitate the crew escaping out the back of the hut. He'd provide somebody that would then meet them with a vehicle that would take them to meet up with one of our people. And it was just fanciful. It was the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Things just don't work like that. And drugging people, just something out of a movie. And yet we didn't have any other solution. This had gone on for a long, long time. We didn't have nobody was giving us any money. We didn't have another solution. So in the end, we agreed to give it a try. But honestly, I don't think any of us thought it was going to work.
Initially it didn't, did it?
And then when we did it, exactly. When we did it, you know, it was all arranged. Leslie flew out to Nairobi and was staying with me. We made all the arrangements, you know, and arranging something like this is a, you know, massive military operation. You need permission from presidents and overflights. You need to charter aircraft. You need to pay guys to drive into some of the worst areas of Somalia to go and pick them up. A whole host of things, massive arrangements we made. And so the night when it was supposed to happen, we didn't hear anything. Nothing happened. We didn't hear a word. All went deathly quiet. And so we thought, yeah, told you so. It was never going to happen. So everybody packed up and went home. And then we heard that the pirates had been chewing this mirrah that you spoke about. This narcotic that they chew. You used to be able to get it in London, and the mirror, the narcotic, you know, counted the sleeping pills, so they didn't go to sleep. So there was no opportunity to escape. So the whole thing, you know, fell through.
How did they end up escaping? Did they try it again?
Yeah, the pirate captain provided more sleeping pills. They tried it several occasions, and then eventually, when there was no mirror, it worked perfectly, and they went to sleep. Of course, what they hadn't done was tell anybody. So I'm there happily sleeping in my bed in Nairobi, and I get a phone call, and this voice says we're out, and it was the bosun. And who was Iranian, said we're free. Oh, what the hell do you mean you're free? What do you mean?
How did you get free?
Well, you know, my language was probably not quite so polite. You know, what do you mean you're free? Well, you know, it worked. We're out. What do you mean you're out? Well, we're out in the bush somewhere. Up on the hill there, there's a radio mast. That's about all we can see. It's very dark. You know, you need to come and get us. What the hell? You know, in the middle of Somalia, you know, in the middle of nowhere. What do you mean I need to come and get you? And your mind is racing. You know, I've woken up from a deep sleep. What am I going to do? How am I going to fix this? And then you slow down, and you know, maybe it's the military in you comes back, and you start thinking logically. And you know, I phoned my contact in Somalia, and very good bloke. He immediately got hold of a few mates in the right area who started to drive towards them. At the same time, he mounted a team to come from further up country to come in and try and find them. And you know, cutting a long story short, they found them. When they were initially found, the hostages thought that they'd been grabbed by another group of pirates, and they were very afraid, and they thought they'd been recaptured and they'd probably be killed. And then eventually, no, it's from John. You know, John. You know, oh my God, you know, we've been rescued. And then my friend who'd driven actually came with the second group of convoy, and whose name is Omar, and you know, John sent me. We're going home. John will be here tomorrow, and you know, he packs them up and takes them away. Stops and they have a meal. I've got a lovely picture. I think in Colin Freeman's book, there's a lovely picture of them sitting in the bush having spaghetti on the ground. And then he took them, and they went to what you know regard as a hotel, and not really much of a hotel, but a hut. And gave them some fresh clothes. We couldn't mount an operation to extract them that quickly, but you know, I flew in the following day, and with a team. But of course, Leslie and everybody else were miles away. I had to mount this on my own. And with a bit of help, the UN provided an aircraft, and we went in and picked them up. When you said earlier on about we flew into an airstrip, and the airstrip was surrounded by armed people and guys in pickups with guns on the back, and it was all a bit alarming. and then you step off the aircraft. In this case, was met by the vice president of this part of Somalia, somebody I knew, and you realize it's going to be all right. But I wanted to shove the president and everybody out of the way and get to the crew, because it was a very emotional meeting.
So that was the Albedo crew, and so they'd gotten out. How did you end up? Because we have this corrupt pirate, who's interesting me right now, because you've got this corrupt pirate leader who's now got him out, and so obviously because it hadn't been planned, where did the corrupt pirate get his money then? Because no one's got the money to give to him right now, because this was all quite spontaneous.
Oh, we paid him.
Okay.
We paid him the first time. We paid him the first time round when it went.
Right. So he'd already got the money.
He got the money. So that's why, that was even, we thought the whole thing had fallen through. We'd paid him and nothing had happened. We'd paid him, already.
Okay. How did you end up paying him then? Did you drop it like with the parachute, or I'm assuming it's not bank transfer?
Now you're asking all these technical questions. But there's a hawala system of money transfers and so on. So we were able to pay him.
Oh, so it is bank transfer.
Basically, yeah.
Wow. So okay. I mean, at that point, why didn't the pirate leader just go, oh well, I might as well just go back on my word and just keep him? I've got the money.
Yeah. So what do you think happened to him?
I'm assuming he ran away and
yeah.
He got killed.
He was killed by the investors.
Oh, okay. So what? So did he run away after the first time when it failed, or did he?
No, he provided the sleeping pills the second time.
Oh yeah.
He just didn't provide anybody to meet them or any transport. They were they had to leg it on foot on their own. So he didn't tell us, so this whole thing came as a total surprise. But in a way, he honored the deal that he made.
Honored his deal.
Yeah, he honored the deal, and then of course he ran away, and his masters found him and killed him.
Wow. So at that point again, like I said, you've successfully managed to get the hostages of Albedo. How many years did that one take?
They were held 4.5 years.
4.5 years. And so was the Naham 3 straight after that one?
No. We did another ship after that, a Thai fishing boat after that called the Prantali 14. So we rescued 4 Thai crewmen that were in a similar position. They were held ashore. Nobody was willing to pay, and we eventually, we were given some money and we got them free.
Yeah, with the Albedo, it was a lot more spontaneous. You almost didn't really have time to sort of be anxious and thinking about it over and over again, because it all happened. I'm sure you were anxious when you heard someone call you up and go, I'm free. But it's like, because it was all spur of the moment, you didn't really have the time. But with the Naham 3, it was a lot more organized. It was a lot more orchestrated, wasn't it? Like in terms of you would, drop in the money, the hostages would be let go, you'd go pick them up. During that whole process, before the process has really, you sort of got the plan, and you're now going to start the plan of getting these guys free. What's going through your mind there? Are you again thinking this is going to fail, or oh my God, how are you sort of going? What's your mental process throughout the whole thing?
I mean, primarily you think, this is just so damn complicated. How am I going to make all this work? But I'm lucky that I have a lot of very good contacts in Somalia from the work that I was doing, for the UN and for my friend Ambassador Mahiga. I was very lucky that I had a lot of contacts at very high level, presidents and prime ministers and so on. So, I was quite well known, and I had a lot of people around who I could call on or coerce into helping me, and to make things happen. When I needed overflight clearance or landing clearance in an area where you wouldn't normally get, it was a it was a direct call to the president of that regional state that fixed it. So even though things were complicated and you worried that they were complicated, you find a way through it and you find a way to make it happen. But these deals are terribly, terribly complex. And like in the Nahum 3 case, where you drop a large amount of money by parachute, you wonder if you're just you're ever going to see the hostages. The money's just going to be taken. And that's part of the skill of a negotiator like Leslie, who done this quite a lot and knows how to create the right atmosphere. There's something about Leslie Edwards that's not come out in any of these books or any of these stories. I told you right at the beginning that I was a young boy, 18, joined the army and went off to the military academy at Sandhurst. If I could show you a picture, the black and white picture of us, finishing our training and passing off, marching in our best uniforms. There's a picture of me at the back, and then 4 guys down from me is Leslie Edwards.
No way.
He and I were in the army together. We joined as cadets together, and then we never saw each other. The first time I heard about him was when the lawyer said, "We've got this professional negotiator who will get to help you." And his name's Ledway. I was like, "Oh, that sounds familiar." And he'd left the army at a fairly early stage and started doing this hostage negotiation stuff. But we'd been cadets together.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? How it went all full circle. You ended up working together to rescue 191 hostages.
He describes it. What the hell are 2 old farts like? At 60 something, running around Somalia like young men from the SAS.
I mean, it's weird because it's like you almost were doing the job that you both trained to do together, and you were both in the British Army. You were like you said, you were running around in Somalia. That's something you don't really do in your 60s. Maybe you might do when you're in the army. And you guys ended up doing it much later in your life. Leslie Edwards, yeah, he fascinated me with what I saw in the documentary, and then I ended up doing my own research on him because I was hoping to try and find an email address for him or something like that, because I'd love to speak to him about like sort of negotiating or whatever. But I couldn't find anything out there. Like when I put in your name, I could find it. I couldn't find anything on Leslie Edwards, like, apart from like one or two websites with his name on them, but no sort of way to email him or get in contact with him. No social medias, nothing.
He's very deliberately, very private person.
Yeah.
That he needs for his trade. I mean, he doesn't just do these cases that we're talking about. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, you talk about this too much. There's too much visibility." But we decided early on that we would use publicity to plead the case of these guys. Also to try and attract or get donors to cough up money for us, but also send a very clear message to the pirates. And this is something I did right at the very beginning. I had no idea how to contact the pirates, and knew all sorts of bad guys in Somalia, but no idea how to contact them directly. So the answer was, and the advice, you need to put it out there. You need to put it out there in the media that you're willing to negotiate for these guys, and that's exactly what I did. And that's how the contact started. A lot of lunatics too, a lot of wannabes who, I've got them. Even some people who could, you hear in movies and stuff about proof of life. Well, before you start negotiating, you need to have proof of life. But even with that, you have to be quite careful because, some guy in the camp might have quickly taken a picture with his phone of the hostages and then claim that was the proof of life. So the proof of life has to be much more detailed and complex. You need to know it's there and then, and the guy that's taken it actually knows and is authorized to negotiate. So proof of life is not such a simple thing. You have to be very careful with it.
Yeah, I know with the Nahum 3 case, they you guys you sent them a word, like a specific word, and you ended up saying that you wanted a picture of all the hostages holding up the piece of paper with that specific word on it, just to make sure that they're all alive on that date and they're all safe. And I wouldn't have thought about that, but that's why I wanted to see if I can get in contact with Leslie Edwards. If John, you can like maybe put my name into Leslie Edwards' ears, and maybe he might come on the podcast. I don't know. I'd love to be able to talk to him, but I mean, I understand completely if his line of work sort of prevents him from being able to do stuff like this. And like I said, I do appreciate. I said it at the beginning. I do appreciate your time coming on here as well. I've just got sort of a few more questions. You've now got an MBE, John. What was that like? That's pretty cool.
It's got nothing to do with this.
Oh, does it not?
No, not at all. We haven't actually. I mean, you'll hear Colin Freeman says in his book, we haven't had any recognition for this work at all. And to be honest, not doing it for recognition either. The greatest recognition is sending these people home to their families. Given when they thought their life was over, they'd given up. They weren't going to go home. Giving people back, their lives when they thought it was over is, you can't do much better than that. It's a fantastic thing, and it's better than anything else, any gong or whatever. This is much better. So recognition's not been our thing really. But my MBE was for something in the army, and something called Operation Granby, and I got the MBE and the honours and awards for Operation Granby, and I went to Buckingham Palace and got my gong, not from the Queen, it was actually from Prince Philip. So but it's still a great thrill, something I'm very proud of, and it was a great day. But as an aside, I was the defence attaché in the Republic of Ireland as well, and in people get MBEs and OBEs and not even knighthoods who are not British citizens for doing things, and tends to be when you're a foreigner, it's awarded by the British ambassador in the country that you're in. So I was the defence advisor and tend to be the master of ceremonies for these things. I was the only one with a smart uniform and a sword and all the gear. So I got to be the master of ceremonies for these awards. So I was the master of ceremonies for Bono getting his knighthood.
Oh, whoa!
And Bono and the Edge, his guitar, got their gongs from the British ambassador, and I was the master of ceremonies. What was even funnier was because when Bono made his speech, he thanked me for his knighthood. No, you need to be thanking the Queen for his knighthood, not me. I was just the
John
guy.
Steed. No, I mean the Queen.
Even the ambassador, going, I gave him the bloody award, not you.
Well, I mean, you got thanks then for even though you have no power to knight someone, you still got the thanks for it. Yeah. So I mean, fair enough. Just to slightly go back, what was it you mentioned? Sort of, you met with these guys or after the Albedo one and the Nahum 3 one. What was it like when you saw that they were finally free, and you met them for the first time? You'd been calling a few of them throughout the process. What was it like when you finally saw them?
When the Nahum, when I flew into the airstrip to get the Nahum 3 crew, it was again very deserted airstrip. They were being held in not held hostage, but they were being kept for the flight in a hut at the end of the runway. So I got out of the plane, being met by other people, taken across to this hut, opened the door, went in, and all of these, the 24 guys, all from Southeast Asia, they look at you. For the first time, some white guy walks through the door, something different. It's not a Somali, not a guy with a gun. It's a white guy in a blue shirt, and I remember somebody saying, "Are you John?" And yeah, yeah, I'm John. The reaction was incredible. I had people holding me around, people holding my legs, people hanging off my neck, people sobbing. It was quite something. I've never seen anything like it ever anywhere or since. And then we took them back on the plane. One of the greatest moments, the pilot announces, on the tannoy, we're leaving Somali airspace. We're just entering Kenya. Huge cheers, where I think it's the point when they actually know they're free. They're out of Somalia at last, and on their way home. So it's quite an emotional thing, and yet that flight, you're not sitting around doing nothing, because you're sitting there, you're producing documents and identity documents and travel documents, because they don't have anything. And even countries provide you with emergency passports and so on, but they don't have pictures or anything. So you're taking pictures in the plane and producing all these documents, and then you stopping through an intermediary point where you do immigration. So you have to go through the whole immigration thing, and so these flights back were were quite busy, so there was no chance to sort of sit back and think,
Have a glass of wine.
am I, what the hell's happened? So it's quite a busy period. It's really when you get back to Nairobi, and then you're in a proper hotel, you've got fresh clothes, you've talked to your family. That's when it tends to set in.
How do you celebrate after that? You just gave them back. You can't give back life, but this is the closest thing that you can do to giving back a life. And you got really emotional in the documentary. I mean, I got emotional as well, just watching you get emotional, and hearing you explain it. It's the best thing that you can actually do with your life. And you said that yourself. How do you sort of celebrate afterwards? What do you do?
It's still not over until you've got them home. I mean, even when you're sitting in Nairobi, you've got all these diplomats and people, who all want their piece of the action, and want to be. In some cases, they try and take over. So as soon as the plane landed, they want to take the guys away to their embassy and so on. And we're quite strict. We want them to stay together. We don't force them apart. We let them get used to the idea that they're free and that they're going home, and we do things with them. We take them for medicals. In the Albedo case, we took them on safari. They said that when they were originally, the ship was going to Mombasa, and they wanted to go. They were going to go on a safari. So could we still do that? So we arranged for them to go on a safari. Nairobi is a fantastic place. It has a national park right on the edge of the city. So my wife organized a big picnic, and we took them off to look at elephants and giraffes and things, and then took them home. But then when they've gone, it's not an anticlimax, but suddenly the pressure and everything is off. You've done it. They're free. It doesn't last long, because in these cases there was always another group. After the Albedo, there was the Prantley 13, and then there was the Nahum 3, which we did in fairly quick order afterwards. And then another long protracted negotiation where until we got the Iranian hostages out. And that was a whole new different ball game. Working with Iran was quite interesting, and there were a couple of cases that we did on our own that I did that weren't related to Les and the other team. We did a couple of Kenyans that we did on our own.
Why? I know this is a bit of a weird one to ask at the end, but why did you feel like you had to do this? And what, especially after you've done one or two, why didn't you just go, all right, I've done one or two, I've done my bit for humanity, I'll let someone else deal with the rest? Why did you feel like you had to do it? Especially when you're a lot older and are having suffered a heart attack.
Because there wasn't anybody else. There was nobody else who was going to do this. I mean, other people would do it if you paid them a lot of money. we were the only ones who were doing it for nothing, and doing it for the right reasons. And we set ourselves a target of getting all of the maritime piracy hostages out, and that we wouldn't stop until they were all out, and then then we would sit back. So the last maritime piracy hostage was 3 Iranians who went home in August last year. Leslie negotiated the deal, and we didn't have to go and get them ourselves. We negotiated the deal, and then they were extracted by others. But we negotiated the deal and with the families to get the money, and then negotiated the deal. So that was the last of the maritime pirate hostages. So they're all free now. There aren't any more. But then then people came along and said, but John, there are 5 other hostages in Somalia. They've got nothing to do with piracy, but they're being held in Somalia. There's nobody who knows more about this than you do. So, what can you do to help? So, having thought we'd finished, there are still people who might benefit from help from us. We're not directly involved, but we are helping advise those who are trying to get them free. So I haven't totally given up.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier on in the podcast that you're excited for this second phase of your life. What's that entailing then? What have you got planned, John?
Well, I thought, leaving the army was phase 1. Working for the UN, involved in maritime security and stuff has been phase 2, and I'm sort of still doing that. And then phase 3 is, retiring here to Cornwall and doing some fun things.
What are you getting up to these days? It's decent weather. I'm sure it's really nice down in Cornwall. You obviously got the G7 happening over there. What have you been up to?
I have a very old house that's not in great condition. So spending my time trying to put it right, and so that we have somewhere nice to retire to.
I saw it earlier on actually when you were using your phone to video call me. I saw the roof and I thought, he's living in a nice house. It looks pretty decent. Maybe he was the pirate that was the corrupt one and just pocketed a little at the end.
Yeah, it's a nice. I'm very lucky. It was my mum's house, and it was built between the 2 wars by her father.
Oh wow!
But when in wartime, the building materials were not that great and not very available, so there are has huge problems with damp and stuff. So but it's a great place. I'm looking out of the window now, and I can see boats. I can see the water. So it's a great place to live.
I bet. And yeah, no, like I said, it does look nice, and Cornwall in general looks like a really nice place to live. John, you've lived a pretty incredible life, and I know you said you didn't do any of it for any sort of recognition, but I'm sure hopefully through the book and maybe even through this podcast, you'll get a bit more recognition. 191 people that you gave there, you and your team gave back. 191 lives you gave back to people, which is just incredible. The documentary, I can't wait to actually read the book as well. I'll leave the links in the description for both of them, because it definitely is something that everyone needs to check out. And it's something that, I consider myself as someone that sort of tries to stay as up to date as possible on the news and politics or whatever. And it's something that I'd never even heard of. I knew sort of piracy was a problem. I knew kidnappings were an issue, but the scale of which they're an issue is something that I didn't even realize. And so it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, John. I have got one final question to you.
What it's advice? Going to be one of your trick questions, isn't it?
It's not any of the trick questions, don't you? Or although it might be actually. What advice would you give to if you could go back to your 20-year-old self? What advice would you give to 20-year-old John?
Oh, easy. Go out and live your life to the fullest. Go and have as much fun and as much adventure as you possibly can, whilst you can. Get out there and live and see life. Don't sit here glued to this thing. Get out there,
glued to the phone. Yeah,
get out there and see life.
And that is it for this week's episode of the Me, Myself, and Hopefully You podcast. A lot to take in there, a lot to take in. And like I said in the podcast, John definitely deserves a lot more recognition than he's been given. Obviously, it's understandable why he's probably not being given as much recognition, because countries don't want to associate themselves with giving ransoms to pirates. But I definitely highly recommend you check out the documentary that I watched. It was completely free to watch. It's on the website and you can just watch it straight away. Check out the book as well by Colin Freeman. I'll leave that linked in the description as well. But yeah, John doesn't really have much to plug. Maybe, you know, he's a humble guy, so I guess he doesn't really want to plug himself too much, but he deserves recognition, and it was an absolute pleasure to have him on. Again, I don't understand how I managed to convince people to come on, especially with stories like John. But they do come on, and I appreciate it more than you can imagine. If you did enjoy this episode, which you should have, then let me know in the comments below, and please do share it with your friends, tagging at MMHY Podcast on Instagram. Make sure you like the video, make sure you comment whatever you want, and subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Have a great week. Until next time.